everyone, and thank you for joining us here for another edition of The Bridge. This is a youth engagement platform created by the Students on Ice Foundation. We are here today to discuss carbon sequestration, and I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Fiona McKean. Uh, just an amazing bio here. Hopefully, I can just scratch the surface of it. A social enterprise entrepreneur, philanthropist, and community builder, Fiona came from a diplomat family and grew up traveling the world, always coming back to Ottawa as a beloved home base. Fiona and her husband, Toby Lutka, are passionate about curtailing the worst impacts of climate change. In January of 2019, they launched Thistledown, a private organization with a mandate to advance decarbonization solutions by helping to prove, scale, and commercialize climate technology. In light of the COVID-19 global pandemic, Thistledown quickly pivoted its team to fund academic research projects for therapies and vaccine development, and to help improve the domestic supply chain for personal protective equipment and contribute to global vaccine distribution. And so that clearly, very quickly from its launch, quickly focused on the world's most pressing issues. But I'm curious, as hopefully COVID passes, that we can kind of come back to what started it all, the core mission of advancing technological solutions for decarbonization. So that sounds amazing, but admittedly, I'm not completely sure what it means. Can you tell me more about that?
Right. So Thistledown is sort of the culmination of, I don't know, probably thousands of dinner conversations that we've just had over the years. Toby and I have been together since he was 20 and I was 21, and I won't give my age, but it's been a while. So we've had, this is a long-term interest, and it's a really meaty and complex problem, which, are our favorite kind. So we've just been thinking about it forever. And, once from a sort of financial point of view, we were able to do something significant about it. It's like, okay, but what do you do? If you just try to tackle climate change, you could take the entirety of all the pennies you've got in all of your pockets, and it's not going to make any dent. So it was really trying to focus on what specifically can we do. We're very sort of technology background. We're a bunch of nerds in my family, so we knew that where could we add value to the problem is probably on the technology side. The other understanding was, there are a lot of very well financed and I don't want to say old, but okay, old. They've been around a long time. A lot of charities working on sort of the natural solution stuff, planting trees, like that. Arbor Day Foundation is one of the oldest charities, I think, in the States. So it was, okay, how do we try and help forge the tip of the spear, keep going on the frontier of what we can do? Because we can plant as many trees as we want. It's not going to save us right now. We have to really figure out new solutions, ramp things up, figure things out. A lot of research has already been done. What are we doing with it? How do we scale it? How do we push it forward? And it's risky. It's very risky. None of this is going to be paying us back ever in our lifetimes, but will it pay back in terms of health of the planet, the future of my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, all of yours? That's the hope. So the payback is not in cash. It's going to be in the sustainability of our ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because the whole idea behind a lot of carbon sequestration is trying to use that technological lens to help to scale like new ideas in a way that hasn't been seen before. Even the idea of carbon sequestration, I think, is a bit more in the new forefront when we talk about climate change. And so when we actually say technological solutions, like, what are some examples of that? So if it's not planting trees, then what is it?
Right. So I think, when we talk about solutions to climate change, I say planting trees because that's the first thing people kind of think of, right? But it's important to understand maybe the magnitude of the issue. You can hear about parts per million and all the things out of the all of the very alarming things coming out of the UN climate documents and all of those things. But I found it really impactful to think about it this way. The amount of carbon that humans are pumping into the air every year is about equal to, like, just picture it, a cube that is 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers cubed. That is the amount that we're putting in per year of like carbon. Just stick it up there. So even if we stopped today, and we've been doing this since the Industrial Revolution, right? Like even if we just like, you know what, we're not going to use a lick more gas, like all cars are electric, all electricity is clean, stop everything all at once, we still have hundreds of these cubes in the air. What are we going to do about it? That's not going to go away anytime soon. It would take a long time to just suck up what we've already done, and through natural means. And we already know today what is happening because of those existing cubes in the air, right? Like if you're on the West Coast, it's a crazy heat wave. If you're on the East Coast, there's like wild winter storms, sea levels, all the things that we've been hearing about, bigger storms, more like wacky weather. We already know what the existing cubes are doing. So yes, we need to do all the, we need to make the behavioral changes, obviously, but we also just kind of need to deal with what's there. And that's where carbon sequestration can really fill that particular issue. The issue is, and what we've been trying to focus on, although not exclusively, is how do we suck it out of the air, for lack of better, like you can get really technical, but it's really like, how do you literally suck it out of the air, and what do you do with what you've captured? So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. And Canada, interestingly, or maybe not interesting, we got a lot of space, so it helps. We have some great companies in this country that are working on this specific issue, whether it's direct air capture, which in its simplest idea, just basically imagine like a vacuum that's pulling air through giant turbines, and whether it's like a chemical reaction or there's all kinds of new methods too that people are working on, just very slowly filtering, literally just filtering out carbon out of this air. Oceans play a huge part in carbon sequestration. And interestingly, there's much less research on oceans. I'm sure this is true for anything in oceanography. It seems to be like the last place we've actually spent time looking at. But you can be doing massive kelp farms. Like what does carbon sequestration look like in the ocean? One thing is massive kelp farms, and then you harvest it and let it sink to the bottom of the ocean, right? Like, and then it becomes mineralized, it becomes deposits on the ground that are just naturally occurring. It's not gonna harm anything. And then that's sequestered carbon down on the ocean floor. Interestingly, that also helps with acidification of the water as well. So you can kind of do two birds with one stone there. But yeah, there's a bunch of different ways, but most of it, so here's a good example of behavior changes and sequestration. You can do, I'm gonna blank on the specific term, but it's like capping of like gas towers and things. So the off gas, it has blue, yeah. So you basically put a filter on top of that cap these gas emitting, carbon emitting sources, whether it's like oil and gas industry or others. We can't turn everything off today as much as we would want to. So how do we not add too much to the cube? Make the cube smaller, suck up as much as you can while you're doing it, and then try and do interesting things with the carbon that you've captured. So there is actually a market for CO2. So if you can talk to people, especially in like the oil and gas industry or manufacturing, if we try and shame them, like use social pressure to try and do it, as we all know, humans just don't react well to that. They're just gonna shut you down, and they're not gonna want to hear you. If you come to them and say, hey, first of all, there's regulations that you have to do this. Second of all, it's kind of the right thing to do. But third of all, you can make a profit from this. Then they're like, okay, I'm willing to hear you out. And so we can get kind of a better uptake from the industry itself, so that it's more willing to move along quicker. Obviously, my preference would be just turn it all off, but you know, I am not queen of the world for sure.
We're getting up there. We're getting close.
Oh, no, nor do I want the responsibility. But
I think you've touched on actually a lot of aspects of this idea, and I think the term is carbon capture, utilization, and storage, often abbreviated to CCUS. And so we understand, you know, why exactly we need to do this. And I think up until now, we just haven't had many solutions to remove some of those blocks. And so a lot of the focus has been on behavior change and trying to reduce the size of the blocks that come out. And so just to give, you know, a description of what exactly CCUS is, you've brought out a lot of examples. Can you help define it for the people who might not have heard of this term before?
Yeah, there are the scientific sort of paragraphs that say it is precisely this, but it is basically the action, however that action is, because there's a bunch of different ways to do it, of capturing, there's the word capture, or capturing carbon, and then either storing it somewhere, and this can be ocean floor, it can be old oil wells, you know, put the carbon back where we brought it out from. It could be, there's a company, I think in Goderich, Ontario, that's using like old mines and things, or do something with it. And this is like kind of where my nerdiness on material sciences comes in, because I'm really curious about what they can actually make out of this stuff. So one of the things that they've been able to make with the captured carbon is improve cement. And you're like, wait, cement is a terrible industry. Again, this is like, how do you make the cube smaller? And humans will need cement for a while longer. There's a company, I think that's in Halifax, called Carbon Cure. It's one of the ones that we've invested in. And this is in the make the cube smaller bucket. They inject a type of cement that is, less, I won't say less polluting than typical cement with CO2. And not only does it sequester the CO2, it actually makes the final product stronger, like materially stronger, so that they need less cement to make whatever the structure is. So it's super interesting. And you say, okay, how do we, and it's not even that complicated to add on to existing cement factories and things. So it's like, okay, how do we encourage those types of like those industries to change, like you say, look, you're going to get more strength, more durability. You'll probably get some kind of green credit depending on what jurisdiction you're working in. And you need less cement so you can do more projects for how much you're actually producing. So we just have to find ways where it's a win-win, you know, and then it has a much higher chance of uptake.
Yeah, and you know, this reminds me a lot of the discussion around waste that has evolved a lot more. This idea that, you know, we have a bunch of this material that we assume is useless, and therefore it's much harder to encourage people to take care of it and use it in a productive way. And so the development of this new usage can really help to spur this uptake in carbon capture, but also try to reduce the size of that cube. And another example I've seen of storage is, I think there was a company, I think somewhere in Ontario, that's trying to inject CO2 into mattresses.
What?
Like
That's cool.
trying to develop a new way to use that material, which is amazing to me. I would happily sleep on a mattress that's taken up some CO2, at least for me. So I definitely think people are getting very, very creative with how to do this. And so how does
there's a really cool one where they're pelletizing it. So you get like a solid material, and then you can pellet like make it into grains like pellets,
Mm.
And then you can use it in like resurfacing of roads. I'm like, that's brilliant. Like, just put it back into the roads, and it's like crazy durable. But the roads themselves or bike paths or whatever you're using can be like carbon sequestration.
Yeah, and it's first of all, that is so cool. I didn't know about that one, so I'll definitely be checking it out after. But it just seems like we're at like the precipice of something brand new, where we're trying to explore all these different ways to use CO2. And so I'm curious, like, how does Thistledown fit into this? Like, you seem to be focusing especially on these brand new ideas and trying to help scale them.
Yeah, so there's a couple different sort of paths to this. One is find who the really great thinkers are. Like the pelletization is Jennifer Wilcox, Dr. Wilcox. She's amazing. I think she just joined the administration, I think at the Department of Energy, which is insane, which is really cool. And I also know that she has ducks at home and that she loves. But but Dr. Wilcox, yeah, so she's just a great example of one of the people who's been, beavering away at this for years and years with not a whole lot of money. And then just in the last couple of years, people have started paying attention. And the sad thing is, good and sad, is that we only started this, I think it was November 2019. So really like right before the pandemic sort of kicked off. And we thought it would take years to sort of figure out the landscape and who's doing what. And then you're like, oh my God, the ecosystem is so small on this particular, niche that we're trying to do. There are very few academics that are working specifically on these issues. And I'm like, okay, well, at least we know everyone now, but we need to expand this. So one of them is like talking to these academics and saying, how do we get more people interested in this? What do you need to attract more students to your line of like what you've been able to forge? We need more people doing that. How do we get them excited about it? How do we, with funds or otherwise, encourage people to think about this particular aspect of climate change? And so that's sort of one branch. And then another is like placing big bets on companies trying hard things. So a lot, like I said, a lot of the research is done, especially on like soil, trees. Like we kind of know enough to say like, yes, we're in trouble, and we need more emphasis on, and then, or therefore we're doing what about it? We need to focus on the what are we doing part. That part is crazy expensive. It is crazy expensive. Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's kind of like government levels of billions, but not a lot of governments are really there yet. Like interestingly, like the EU has really made huge strides, like European Union in the last couple of years. Like they're especially the budgets that came like during the pandemic have really focused on like a green industry or a blue industry renewal. And I'm like, go you guys, like I hope to follow really soon. But as we know, like governments can have like a sluggish response. Is it going to go as fast as we need? And these companies need money now in order to survive or to continue their research or to provide some kind of test samples to say like this is going to work and it just needs to scale. Mm-hmm. So that's where Toby and I decided like, okay, we're incinerating money. Like we expect no return because it's really risky stuff. You just have to kind of assume that it's like gone, but that progress will be made. Whether this particular experiment doesn't scale well, we're still going to move forward the bubble of human knowledge. We're going to know a little bit more, or the people that are interested in this topic will have that much more experience, or they will have made, this many more connections, and just hope that even the failures will inch us along. And then you hope that, whether it's through the academics we're supporting or the companies we've been able to find, or, various university projects and things like that, you just hope, and this is like the whole point, is like, let's just hope something really works, like just mind-blowingly works. It kind of, the same impact that internet has had on humans, kind of like what is that thing that's going to put us into a whole other different a species level event, frankly, that will really change everything about how we live our lives, how it's powered, how it's discussed, like everything. How do we make sure that, here's a slightly depressing thought. The planet will continue no matter what, right? Like no matter what we do to it, it will find a way, life will find a way. And the question is, are humans along for the ride? And, to the question that I sometimes get, how do we get people interested about this? Like, why should people care? Is kind of the question of how does someone answer the question, like, do you want humans along for the ride? So if you can care about that, then you should care about climate change.
And the hope is that the answer is yes, we want to be there for that ride.
I'm optimistic.
I definitely want to be there.
I want to be there. I want, our ancestors to be there. I want, descendants and everybody.
Yeah, and it's so important. I love your point about trying to essentially take the biggest risk, but it's oddly, I think we often forget to say it's the biggest reward, right? Like this whole climate change experiment and trying to find solutions for it isn't just a pet project. And in my opinion, at least, I think we should very much be investing everything we can to save our species. It seems like a worthy cause.
It seems like a worthy cause for sure. I think we should also, as a species, not be too rigid in our thinking. Like there's a lot of debate within the climate change community on like natural versus technological solutions and all that stuff. Like the answer should be yes and. It has to be both. We're not gonna do enough with just like solar, wind, as much as the improvements that we've possibly done. We're not gonna be able to reach the scales to just power all of humanity on that. So what are we going to do? I think it's really important not to dismiss things like nuclear, which is a very contentious thing. But I think our concept of nuclear is also kind of from the 50s and the 60s, like those reactors. There are a bunch of new reactors, new ideas, fusion, which is, the joke about fusion is it's always 20 years away. But there are new companies working on that problem. And I mean, if we can solve the energy problem, we solve the climate problem, we solve the food problem, we solve so many problems. Like, think of the impact on poverty alleviation if we just have clean and cheap fuel. Like if we can figure that out, that is a species defining leap. We know we can't rely on what we've had. We know we need new things. And I think we just have to be like, try not to get too tribal almost about how things should be done. We can't just plant trees to save ourselves. It's going to need a ton more of that. The other thing about natural solutions, and again, it sounds like I'm dismissing it. Absolutely not. We absolutely need it. But when people think about the scale of how do we actually not just make a dent, but a massive impact, everyone assumes that like all forests are carbon sinks. A lot of forests are actually carbon emitters. And we have to remember that trees have a natural cycle. They do most of their carbon sequestration in the first, say, 20 years, depending on the tree. And then it sort of steady, sort of slows down. And then, of course, when they die and fall over, they release all the carbon once they fall over. So as soon as we have dying forests, we have a massive carbon emitter, not sink. So if we're just like planting trees and, and then just leave them there, then we're buying ourselves a bit of time, but we're not actually doing the sequestration. It's a short-term sequestration. We need something that's going to be like 100 years plus. So we have to figure out ways of like, how do we manage those forests? How do we use the timber so like get the tree to do its peak sequestration, and then you're actually using the timber. This is where, you know, some in the green community would be like, don't cut the trees. And you have to say, okay, there's the don't cut the trees, and then there's, if you're focusing, if what you're trying to move is carbon, like removing carbon, then we have to be really clinical about forest husbandry and taking proper care of it. Otherwise, we could just be creating more carbon emitting forests that aren't helping, you know, really move the needle on carbon sequestration. And then you look at the forest fires and everything else, like how do you even assume that a forest is going to last for 20 years at this point? You have to be very careful about where you're planting it, all the bugs, you know, there's so many, right. From climate change itself, it's putting that natural solution at risk.
And so, like, in addition to a very measured and ecological approach with nature-based solutions, we should also keep in mind and, you know, not put all our eggs in one basket, essentially, with recognizing
Gotta do it all. Gotta do it all. And we do it too. So we teamed up with Team Trees, which was like a big internet phenomenon right before the pandemic, with Mr. Beast, and like we donated $1 million to plant 1 million trees. So like we do that. But you have to also know what else is. It can't be the only solution. Yeah.
Right. Also, I should say I did follow that campaign, and just what a ride. For anybody who hasn't seen it, please search up Team Trees.
That was hilarious. That was a fun ride.
Amazing. But I wanted to actually get into that because, as you mentioned, a lot of people focus on nature-based solutions and also understand nature-based solutions and some of the impacts it can have. And so in terms of a lot of the solutions we've discussed here, I'm most familiar with like direct air capture as an example. And I think the vacuum analogy is perfect. It is a fan that sucks in carbon dioxide, passes it essentially through a type of filter that sticks to carbon dioxide, and then you can pull it out after. And so when we talk about that, it sounds very fantastical, like this magical machine that can get all of this done. And so I guess the question is, like, how feasible is it? How effective is this compared to something like a tree? And I wanted to get your sense of that, because you also recognize there is risk in a lot of these ideas not working, but also what is the benefit if it does?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest question, right? So right now, it's not very efficient at all. Like it's very expensive to get 1 ton of CO2 removed through direct air capture. But 10 years ago, it was, I don't know how many much more times bigger, like more expensive. And like 20 years ago, did it even exist? You know, it just shows that progress, it's called like buying down the cost curve, right? We're buying down the green cost curve. We are willing to overpay for sequestration, good long-term verifiable sequestration, so that it becomes cheaper for everybody else. That's been our policy within Thistledown, but it, you know, even through Shopify, you know, they're buying the best possible credits at way overpriced. Compared to, you know, unfortunately, the market is awash with really crappy credits, carbon credits. So, you know, you really have to do your research as to what is actually being sequestered and for how long.
Yeah, and in terms of that sequestration component too, like I've seen a lot of the research that's come out recently where people are injecting CO2 into rock formations, and apparently that can last almost forever, essentially.
Yeah, geological timescales, yeah.
Incredible work, and so just seeing where that can go, I completely agree. But I really wanted to emphasize, like I know that a lot of people discount these technological solutions. Like direct air capture, it can scale in a way that trees, for example, can't, because trees have a lot of needs when it comes to like land masses and in terms of like those ecological timescales of being able to develop the systems where they can grow effectively. Like theoretically, if we could get a really good like direct air capture machine, it could be as effective as millions of trees.
Yeah.
And we can keep that running 24/7, and we can fit it into a model where companies that may be more polluting can help offset some of their emissions, for example. Like
Yeah.
it can integrate in a way that maybe other solutions can't, and scale in a way that others can't. And so I really wanted to emphasize that too, in that when we talk about technological solutions, I love the analogy with the internet, because we just don't quite understand how effective it could be, but it could be world changing.
It,
And so
I think I think we need to not use the word could anymore. Like it will. It's just how much time, honestly. Like direct air capture. So here's where things like AI and machine learning and all the other stuff can help us, is if we stop thinking of like Canada's climate commitments and everybody else, like if we start thinking on a global level, which, okay, we're humans, so good luck. But if we did, then this is where we, computer modeling could say, you need a huge one here, there, because right now, for example, Climeworks, which is in the UK, like there are a bunch of direct air capture companies, but they're like the one in, is it Squamish? I can't even remember where they are.
Squamish, yeah.
Yeah, in Squamish, Carbon Engineering. There isn't a lot of carbon in the air specifically there, right? Like, so the air that they're trying to sort of suction through is not the worst on the planet. Yes, it diffuses and everything else, but if we were more strategic about where these things were going, and we put in a ton of money to say, okay, how do we actually make this way more efficient? Because you have to go through tons and tons and tons of air to be able to get like tiny amounts of the mineralized carbon. So we can be more strategic about it. I've always seen like infographics that show, if we only, put solar panels on half of the Sahara, but if we thought in a global context, we could be way more strategic about where these solutions are going in for the best possible effect. That part, I'm much more confident about technology and humans solving climate change than I am on world governance. So, but I think that's like, yeah. Governance is tricky.
I like the idea of, I like your point about looking at it from a global lens, because this also does remind me that in terms of a lot of the technological solutions, it also kind of democratizes it in some ways, because again, a lot of other solutions may only be available in some regions of the world.
Yeah.
And the idea that carbon dioxide essentially diffuses around the atmosphere. It doesn't matter where you emit it from, it just very quickly spreads out. And so as a result, theoretically, we were to put one of these capture plants and scatter them in all the places where we can work together to help suck all that carbon dioxide up.
Yeah.
And also, I did get the chance to see the plant in Climeworks, and it is so cool how you can build these big machines that basically just think of like a long rack of vacuums just lined up, just sucking up carbon dioxide. Like it is something that's already being done.
Yeah.
And so I think when we talked too about investing in these startup solutions, like yes, they are definitely an early stage, but we are already building them. They are already available. They're already like finding out new ways to use this. It is definitely moving along, like whether we help or not, and hopefully we can just help speed that up.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so now that we've kind of gotten a sense of what exactly is being done, maybe like from the more technological perspective, we touch upon policy a little bit. And so, we get a sense of what you're doing, we get a sense of what these startups are doing. Like, what else do you think can be done in order to make this the forefront of climate change solutions that we want it to be?
Right. I mean, advocacy has already achieved so much. Like if you actually break it down into, all the different policies that have been passed, at whatever level of government, it's already made a huge impact. And I don't think we could have gotten here without them at all. Like even in our own country, I'm just thinking back to like the 80s and 90s. Like it was only really in the 90s that we started even hearing about it in school. Like I remember recycling was the big thing. So we're still so new at this as humans. Like if you actually think about how 130,000 whatever human years we've had. I can't remember. It's been a while since I read *Sapiens*.
We weren't there.
Yeah, but this is like it's the blink of an eye in terms of the time scales. It feels like forever. It feels like, why aren't we doing anything? We aren't going fast enough. Why won't people listen? Like in humanity years, not human years, like we're going lightning fast. And that's deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people. People don't like change. There's a generalization, but it's important to remember that we are moving fast, even though it doesn't feel like it. And but that doesn't mean, let up, but it means here's some perspective and feel good about what you've already done. What advocacy, I think, where we can get sort of in our own way is, again, that sort of almost Puritan style thinking of it. We can only fix it this specific way, and being really rigid in thinking instead of being more inclusive in our thinking. Like we're going to need natural and technological and advocacy and personal decisions and like all of it.
Right. I love that lens because the truth is I don't remember a time, and I think a lot of people around my age too do not remember a time before we knew that. And so I certainly don't remember a time that wasn't mentioned, and I certainly that who's starting school and prioritize. And so when we look back on like this sense of for the past 20 years, there is a huge dissonance, and I think just a lot of disappointment in a lot of what hasn't been done. And so I really like your optimism there, because I think that like a lot of people are just sick and tired of people not doing enough. And I do think it is a good reminder that we have done a lot, and it does come from a lot of people just working day and night, whether it's on advocacy, whether it's on working on building these solutions, who have gotten us to where we are, and definitely you are one of them, and we're very thankful for that. And so it is a very, very kind reminder. And I think that, when we talk about now young people, like there's a question of what else can we do? I love your point about advocacy, and young people have been very much at the forefront of this. Like, do you have any other ideas on what else like people my age could do to help contribute to this?
Try to align your passions get used so much. Like try to, what else can I say? Your gifts. Everyone has their gift, whether it's communication or engineering or whatever. Like basically, I'm trying to remember which one of my friends was advocating for this, but I thought it was such a great way to do it. Like everyone needs to have like a career, a way they're paid, like you do that, but pick something that is going to directionally align with the longevity of humanity. Like whatever you do, don't be in the way of that. Whatever you, and that's super generic, but I think it's one of the biggest decisions that we make as humans is how much time, like your career, whatever it is going to suck up a significant chunk of your brain power, your time, your human life scale, right? And just pick something that you're going to feel proud of. And it sounds kind of stupid to say, but it's true. Like think of all the hours, a typical, let's say 40 to 80 hours a week, right? 52 weeks a year. Well, let's say you're taking a couple weeks vacation, but then how many working years are you putting in? That is an amazing amount of human creativity and energy that's going into what? So kind of your career decision is the biggest decision that you can make, your biggest climate decision that you can make. Yeah, you can like get rid of your plastic straws, But what are you doing with your 40 to 80 hours a week, every week for the rest of your working life? And maybe you're bouncing around a bit, but it's going to be on a theme. What do you want that theme to be? Is a huge potential climate decision.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And you know what? Maybe that could be something that we mention a lot in our schools as well. You know, not just personal habits, but long term. What is it that you want to do, and what impact do you want to have? I absolutely love that. And the truth is, you know, I hope people when they're listening to this, they also take that to heart, because I think I'm at that juncture, and I think a lot of people are, where they're not completely sure what they want to do. And so just being mission aligned and figuring that out on the way, that should always be the goal. And I guess the question for you is like, what's next for you? You know, you already have a huge set of accomplishments behind you, but what can we expect to see with Thistledown and everything else you do?
Right. Well, I started my work life as a diplomat. I worked at Global Affairs Canada, did that for 10 years. And then, you know, the Epinicon happened, the restaurant, and 3 kids happened along the way. And then this foundation has happened. And each major jump has been sort of like, whoa, what's going on? So, but this one feels really, it's the first one that's been, I mean, kids were deliberate, but it's the first one that was really deliberate. Like, what do I want to do right now? You know, Toby and I talk a lot about minimizing future regret. Like, in 20 years, what am I going to wish that I had done 20 years ago? And you can scale that to, what do I wish my city had done 20 years ago? What do I wish my country had done? What should we as humans have been doing for the last 20 years that we haven't done? And that's where, you know, that is the question that kind of fuels Thistledown. What is possible right now that we are ignoring or not seeing, that we're going to wish we would, oh my God, this is an English lesson, that we wish we would have done, there we go, in 20 years. So find those people, find those ideas, find those companies, find those charities, find those, whatever it is, and make sure that we can accelerate their on-ramp as fast as we can, and try and get other people jazzed about this, so that there's more money, more fuel, more ideas, more energy, focusing on arguably the biggest threat to humanity. It's like a giant asteroid coming, and we know it's there, and it gets slowly bigger every day, and we're all kind of like, someone will figure it out. You know, like, we just need to start figuring it out.
Yeah, we just have to be at the one starting to scream.
Yeah. And it's screaming helps a little because it gets everyone attention, but at some point we just need to stop screaming and do the work.
Exactly. And this is something I've observed just throughout our conversation, that is, I am so uplifted by like your attitudes when you're talking about these ideas. Like, I care about these so much, and again, I think I touched on it, that it's so easy to be jaded and dissonant about this problem. Like, where does your motivation and enthusiasm come from? Because it's so evident every time you talk about it.
I think it's very easy to be pessimistic about these problems, and it takes work to be optimistic. But the more you actually talk to people, read the papers, like scientific papers, you know, meet with the companies, hear their crazy ideas that just could work, and what does that mean, and how can that scale, and how does that affect all these other problems that humanity's been dealing with forever? You can't help but say, like, you know what, damn it, one of these is going to work and then everything is going to be amazing. And you can, well, not everything, obviously, but the existential dread, frankly, that a lot of people feel around climate is absolutely real. And you can argue that it is absolutely, like, that is the logical response. The logical response here is like, oh God, what the hell is going on? And why can't we just move fast enough and fix this? But that is a paralyzing feeling. If you let it take over, it is a paralyzing feeling, and then you're not actually effective at moving things forward. So you have to accept the information, like, yes, this is happening. You can have those feelings of, oh my God, what are we actually doing to ourselves? And what does this mean for my kids and your kids? Um, and then you have to get through that and say, and what am I going to do about it? So we're at the what am I going to do about it? And the more people that get to what am I going to do about it, the better. So it's like I'm trying to move everyone through the like, okay, you got your feels. Yep, got the feels. The feels are slightly helpful, but they're kind of in the way now. Let's go. Then now it's cheerleading time.
No, I love it, and I really do think like you're right. We need solutions, and we need ideas. We need resources too. But we also need this added, very difficult, but we can, and I think that's something that we have to hold on to.
For sure.
Other than that, I think that this is the perfect point to leave off with for everyone here, just to remember just how much others are doing, how many solutions and ideas we're investing in, all the even ideas we don't yet know about, and to know that we can be a part of that solution. I think is the perfect reminder for everyone to leave off of. Fiona, do you have any other closing thoughts that you would like to share?
Just to say that there's like, if you're at all curious about what we've been talking about today, there's a lot of great materials available. There's Project Countdown, no, sorry, Project Drawdown. There's a countdown and a drawdown. Both of them are excellent. Their book is a little bit dated now, but 2017, I think it was released. So, you know, some of the like emerging technologies have already kind of happened that they talk about, but it gives a really good sort of, each chapter is a different, you know, afforestation, direct air capture, you know, all the different sort of major subcategories. We didn't even get into soil health and all that. Like that's a whole other great conversation. But there's so many things to look forward to out of all this too. It isn't all dread. Try not to get trapped in that feeling because it's not a productive feeling. It's also not okay to be like deliriously happy. No, like go in, eyes open, make good choices as to the best of your knowledge. And if we don't have optimism, then I don't think we have the energy to do it. So, you know, we need to keep ourselves motivated to say that there is a way out of this. Because otherwise, like we're just going to lose people to apathy. So there is a way out of this.
And to remember what we're fighting for, right? To keep that motivation going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, other than that, thank you so much, Fiona, for your time today. I absolutely loved it. I know I'll be replaying this back whenever I fall into my pit of apathy. And thank you all so much for tuning into another Bridge event. This is just an example of some of the many other talks that will be on here. You know, ranging from carbon sequestration to Inuit stories and everything else in between to try to fight the climate crisis. And so I encourage you to check those out too, and check out all the other topics and amazing people that we've talked about here today. Other than that, thank you again, Fiona, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Take care.